You haven't signed up for Connect? Are you nuts? You're missing out. You're really missing out. Click the button, pack your bags, call your account manager, grab your boots, and I'll see you this June in Nashville.
What does a pharmacist do? Well, most people might answer that a pharmacist dispenses the medications that my doctor prescribes. Now, I work with a ton of great pharmacists, and one thing that I don't generally see is excitement about pills in a vial. And this is probably because pharmacists have been trained to do so much more. So what can you get excited about in your community? To find out, let's go beyond the scripts. Hey, welcome back to Beyond the Scripts. I'm your host, Will Tuft, the Director of Education at PioneerRx. And today we have a special guest, as normal, as always. But this week, when I introduce our guest speaker, I always want to look for something special about their pharmacy, something interesting about their career, their focus, their role in the community. And I really couldn't have said it any better than a Google review that I'd like to share really quickly. So this Google review starts out, "This pharmacy is without a doubt the best. I live in San Antonio, had to travel Austin for major surgery. The day I was released, the doctor sent us to pick up some prescriptions, one of which was compounded. The service we received was out of this world. The staff treated us as though we were regular customers. They were so kind and helpful. They're not just a pharmacy. They do sell all the medical supplies and equipment you would expect at a privately owned pharmacy, but they also have an array of locally handcrafted items with a nice inventory of wonderful items like costume jewelry, handbags, games, books, snacks. I have to say this place made a lasting impression on me." They go on to talk about your immunization services and how they adapted those later on because of that amazing first impression that they had. So this Google review just says so much about this pharmacy. And so happy to introduce Rannon Ching, one of the driving forces behind the success of Tarrytown Pharmacy. So Rannon, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always exciting to talk with you. So yeah, and I love that Google review. It's great.
Yeah. So that's one of the things about your the Tarrytown website is you guys make it super easy to get to those Google reviews. And so you can read so many of those Google reviews. And then not only do you guys drive people there, but also important to engage and interact with those. And I saw so many responses from the pharmacy too. So I thought that was just a really cool aspect. And, it's really hard to find a better way to describe what your pharmacy is all about than just hearing from a successful interaction with one of your patients.
Yeah, and I think we love that too. And I always think about it too, because every time I look at other pharmacies or even our pharmacy itself, like I would say, if you looked back, maybe even like 2 years ago, we maybe had we've been in business for over 80 years and we had, like 30 Google reviews or something. And I was just like, man, it's so crazy that we take care of patients all the time. And people, like, I have handwritten notes and little sticky notes on my desk all the time about how great, Austin was, or, hey, your pharmacist took care of me, or I have all of these great, responses, but if you don't capture them, you don't really get to share the narrative of like what we do and how we do it. And so I really do like Google reviews. It's kind of a double-edged sword because, I had someone give us like a 1-star review because our pharmacy was too nice. It said, "This isn't a pharmacy." I mean, they sell medications, but it's more of like a boutique. And so it's kind of funny where you have to engage in those people too. And one part of reviews is that even if someone has a bad review, you have to address it. And if you don't, then you kind of let someone almost like badmouth or misinterpret your pharmacy or your staff without kind of defending yourself. And so not with getting rude, but just saying, "Hey, thanks so much for coming in. We are a real pharmacy. It just happens that, it smells really nice when you walk in. And if you want to buy a gift for your wife or your husband or your kids, you can do that too." And so a lot of it's just the engagement and stuff too. And it's so funny here in Austin because you have so many restaurants and bars that have thousands and thousands of reviews. And then you have these businesses that are small businesses that are taking care of the community, giving, COVID vaccines to people all over the state and all over the city. And, a pharmacy might have, 8 Google reviews and stuff. And so it was really important for us to make it as accessible as we can, especially after, when we started doing testing. We had a lot of folks, we added a little kind of like link to our review after testing, several years ago. That like the texting laws are kind of different. And so we had to kind of like move some links and stuff, but just giving people every opportunity to kind of like share their experience with people, good or bad too, because sometimes if someone had a bad experience, like I want to know that, because that's a talking point with my staff to be like, hey, was this something that we could have done better? Or is this something that, maybe patients are perceiving a certain way? So I really think, while not the end all be all, like I think Google reviews are a really great opportunity for us to share like what it's like to be a patient without actually having to drive and walk in the door.
Yeah, man. Because like, especially now, I think we're all so conditioned with just internet commerce. Like anytime I'm looking at any product, I want to read the reviews, and because a company can tell me all day long how great they are, but to actually have a customer turned advocate is a whole nother thing. And on the flip side, haters gonna hate. There's always gonna be people who want to nitpick and complain. And so before I buy anything like any major purchase, I love to go look at those too, because it's interesting. Okay, what can people find to complain about? Because people are going to find something to complain about. So, a lot of times you can read those, and those are actually reaffirming to me, because I'm like, okay, cool. That's all they could find to complain about. And this is clearly someone who wants to complain.
Yeah. If you see a review and it's like, they didn't have the color I liked, you're like, oh, right. Like now we're in business. Like, yeah, if that's the worst thing, we're doing okay, Yeah, like for someone to complain that the pharmacy was too nice, I'll take that. Like, I'll take that all day long. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting too. I think people love to kind of be an influencer, right? Like there's this whole thing with Yelp and with Instagram and, like the idea of being an influencer. And so restaurants are a great place to do that. So it is funny, like you'll see, hundreds of reviews about a spring roll. And yet a pharmacy that's providing amazing services, it doesn't have that same niche genre for influencers, I guess. Kind of interesting.
Yeah. And I wonder too, and it's something that I've talked about a lot of, it's kind of like PBM driven too, because like we've been talking with legislators recently about patient choice and steerage and things like that. So it's really easy to share your opinion on a place that you have a choice to go to. It's really tough when you're like, man, I love this place, but I can't go fill my meds at Tarrytown because I don't have a choice. And so everyone can just drive up and get a spring roll and stuff like that too. But I do wonder sometimes or I don't know, or it's also kind of a personal thing too. You don't want to be like, man, this was the best doctor ever. I had a really bad, toe fungus and it got better, So I think part of it is like, there's a little bit of like a privacy thing, but I do think it's interesting, like, especially on Twitter too, where it's like a lot of people just want to have people influenced or respect their opinion. And I think even with some Google reviews, you can almost like hear the voice in their head of being like, like trying to kind of throw weight around, even though I don't know who this person is, but if they're trying to say something like critical or really great, it's really nice, but you have to kind of like balance them out,
Yeah. There's probably just like so much psychology that we really haven't unpacked, because really all that's fairly new, but, behind like associating like my positive feelings and self-worth with the success of this amazing dish, like, interesting thing. So anybody who's not familiar with Tarrytown, give me the elevator pitch on Tarrytown Pharmacy and what you guys are doing there.
Yeah, for sure. So Tarrytown Pharmacy is the quintessential family pharmacy, small business pharmacy. We were founded in 1941, the day before Pearl Harbor. And we've been owned by the same family, the Newberry family, since then. So Mark Newberry is the current owner, and his grandfather was the one that purchased the store way back in the day. Mark's dad ran it for a long time, and then Mark took over in 2006, a few years after he graduated pharmacy school. And basically, I would say if you asked us 6 years ago of like what we were, I would explain to you that we're family-owned, community-centered, really kind of like backbone of the local community pharmacy, where we'd always be at the elementary schools and the middle schools. We fundraise for the youth associations and the sports teams and things like that. And so really kind of every typical independent pharmacy that's out there, right? Like you take care of people really well, you know them really well, you know your patients, they know you. And that was kind of it, right? We filled prescriptions, that was it. And really, I would say really 6 years ago, that kind of took a turn. So in 2015, I came back to work at Tarrytown. I had worked at Tarrytown since 2009. So since I was 18 years old.
Oh, wow.
As a tech in training. And Mark is a really big friend and mentor of mine. And he taught me everything kind of about pharmacy, how to treat people, how to take care of folks. And I worked through undergrad pharmacy school, worked at a chain for a little bit and came back in 2015. And it really wasn't until 2016. And actually when we got Pioneer, and I know, I promise I'm not, I wasn't told to say this by Pioneer, I promise, but it really was a sample of when I went to the chain and I had been there for a year. Before that, I really had no chain experience. And I thought that independent pharmacies were really the gift to the community. Like there's no one that can do what we can do. Really, it's independent or nothing. And then what I really saw was when I went to that chain pharmacy, the technology had gotten so good in these other areas that you could take a high school kid, put them in front of a, chain computer, and literally it would make them sound like a rock star. Like, oh, looks like, we're waiting to hear back from your doctor on this. And yeah, this one, just following prompts on a computer. And so when I came back to the pharmacy in 2015, we were still doing stuff by hand. We were like hand verifying. We didn't have computer systems to do verification. And so it was we had a fax box, like a little Rolodex fax box. And so it was very like old tech. And so Mark and I, when we came back, really wanted to enhance, like, what are we doing? And part of that was our computer system. We were using basically a free pharmacy software from our wholesaler. And the first thing we did was went to San Antonio for the Pioneer conference there. And luckily it was like an hour away from us in Austin. And yeah, we really dug into what Pioneer can do, loved the team. And 2016, we switched, and then I never looked back. I mean, just adding a print queue, having final verification. Like I just talked to one of my friends who owns a pharmacy close by, and they don't even utilize a print queue right now and final verification. So even if you have Pioneer, it's not enough just to have it, it's how you utilize it. And so really growing from there. So everything that we've done that's super cool and I'm super proud of, and my team has done an amazing job on, was all kickstarted by our technology. And so I really think that now it's not really an elevator pitch now, Will, so I apologize. But I would say my elevator pitch now would be a family pharmacy that's been in business for 80 years, doing the traditional things of taking care of folks, and now looking forward to what can pharmacy do beyond just the scope of what every independent pharmacy does. And we all take care of people really well. And what's that next level of providing, pharmacy profession advancing level services. And so that's really what we want to focus on now. Like we never will go away from taking care of people really well, but how can we take what we do in our small community and expand it to the greater Austin area or even the country,
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a long elevator, but
it was, yeah. It got stopped a few times on the way up. Yeah.
That's okay, man. Somebody just hit all the buttons.
It was like L. Yeah. It was an L.
So, you touch on a few interesting things there. Like, when I was an installer, I was kind of amazed when I would go to some of these pharmacies and see the software that they were using, prior to PioneerRx. And some of it was surprisingly antiquated, by today's standards. And I guess everything's moved so quick over the past, 20 years. But it's amazing because a lot of those softwares came out fairly early in that technology curve. They were early adapters to take advantage of computing power. But it's like you see these ramp ups of early adaptation, and then there's that period of use, and then there's that period of kind of maybe getting complacent or getting comfortable or and so you have to re-engage and challenge yourself again to take that next step. So you see, pharmacies doing that with that initial software. And then that was probably Mark's father, I guess, would have taken that jump, I guess, sometime in the 80s.
Yeah.
And then, you see that jump into Pioneer. And even for existing users, you kind of touched on that second jump where you get comfortable with that base level of knowledge. Okay, now let's take that next level step up and really utilize the software, for those advanced functions. So.
Yeah, and I say that a lot, even when we talk about services too, and that's something that we constantly have to, or like I have to constantly fight against too. It's like you might start a really cool service, but it's like the maintaining of it, right? So it's like almost like, people can start doing testing, but how do you ramp up beyond that? People might start doing vaccines. How do you ramp up beyond that? Or even like you might start diabetes education, but like what we found working with the University of Texas is so many pharmacies will get accredited to do diabetes education and then just fall off, right? So how do you not just set something up initially and then just let it kind of like fade into nothingness? And so it's a hard challenge, and it does take a mindset of constantly pushing and advancing and figuring out new stuff. And so I think you're right, like a complacency or just almost like a fear of the uncomfortable, like kind of like nature of being in between, like, all right, like it's going to be really difficult to, add a print queue. Like that was the hardest thing for my team. Like, we used to have a stack of labels. Every time you processed a prescription, a label would print out. And then, print queue was a revelation to me at the chain. And so coming back, I was like, guys, like we need baskets. We need to make sure that we can do work efficiently. We need to make sure patients are grouped together and just doing that. And it did take a while. Like, to be honest, it was really, really difficult, especially like coming back. But now I think, you kind of build this culture, and my team's great because they're so flexible. Like every time I throw in a new post edit, they'll get mad at me for like a second, but then after a while they kind of like, get used to it and stuff too. So, but I think part of it is just building that culture of, hey, things are going to change and it's okay. It's not scary. We're going to start doing texting, and, you have these post edits that come up, and we're going to have a print queue, and we're going to start doing med sync, and we're going to start doing all this stuff. And so it's definitely like a mindset. And sometimes it gets hard because sometimes you just are tired, but you just can't give up,
Well, and there's only so many things that, one person can do. And so if you're the owner, operator, bench pharmacist, and an entrepreneur and new service researcher and implementer and, patient success manager, like it's really hard to do all of those things and continue to do all of those things. So it seems like Mark's built a great team that kind of allows the different team members in the pharmacy to fill those niches and really grow. And I think it's really interesting that, as the pharmacist in charge, you're able to have such a strong role in Tarrytown, but also within Texas Pharmacy Association and speaking at various events within CPA. So I think that's probably, something that I would guess changed with Mark from, his father's generation of being a bench pharmacist, or has that always kind of been their management structure?
I don't think so. I think that's really unique to Mark. And like, that's the one thing I wish, I never knew Brian, Mark's dad, but he was like, he's like the pharmacy Yoda. He always had a saying and a thought for everything. And I think a lot of pharmacists do like that. Like my uncle owns a pharmacy even to this day in Hawaii. And it was very interesting seeing kind of like the old school mentality of like, my uncle was in the pharmacy every single day, every single hour. And he would always say, Rannon, if I'm not here, that means I'm paying someone else to be here. And I think it's just a shift from thinking of, well, yeah, if you're not there, you're having to pay someone, but what can you do in that time, right? Like when I became PIC, that's one thing that Mark's always been really great about, is just giving you resources and time and just saying, hey, you know what, hey, take 20 hours outside the pharmacy and see what you can do. And actually, when I first kind of came into this role, he was like, Rannon, you should be full-time out off the bench working on all the stuff that you want to do, because like that's really going to move the needle. And then I was the one that was like, I don't know, Mark, I still want to have one foot in the pharmacy and I don't want to lose being a good pharmacist. And let me do 20 hours a week outside the pharmacy. And he was like, that's fine. But I mean, in 3 weeks, you're going to come back and realize it's not enough. And sure enough, all the things that we were trying to do, I was like, Mark, you're right. Like I do need just full time to be able to do this. And part of it's the team that or not part, but a lot of it, if not most of it's the team we have, because everything that we're talking about doing, you can't do unless you have people that you can trust to do it. And I think that's the big thing that Mark kind of realized as well, was he did the same thing to start our huge long-term care pharmacy. They have, over 100 something employees. They have employees all over the country. That started in the 10 by 10 foot little closet in our old location that we had from 1971 to 2010. And all of that started in that little room because, Mark said yes to an opportunity and kept figuring it out. And so I think that's what we're really great. And that's why I call it the Tarrytown way is, it's not even like fear of failure, but always being okay learning and growing and taking a chance. And a lot of what I say is when opportunities arise, we accept the opportunities and figure out how to do it later. Like that was something that even we worked with y'all on. We had an opportunity to go and immunize all of the intellectually disabled folks around Texas. But that would mean, originally they quoted us like 50,000 people. And imagine data entering vaccines for 50,000 people.
Yeah.
So that's when we reached out to, y'all and Josh and was like, Josh, we need a way to mass upload patients and vaccines. And then, and then y'all did it and stuff too. And so we ended up not utilizing Pioneer for that project because the state health department made us use their proprietary system. But that kind of responsiveness to the need is huge. And so I think a lot of it is, I had no idea how we were going to data enter all that stuff or get it all taken care of, but we just have to accept these opportunities as they come up. Otherwise, if you keep saying, oh, well, I don't know how that would work. And it's kind of like the perfect's the enemy of good or, good enough. Like just figure it out. Like, we can give shots, we can data enter. If we have to figure out how to do that, we'll do it later. So I really do appreciate like Mark's mentorship, and it's been really cool just having a lot of freedom to practice. And I think that's the benefit of independent pharmacy, is that you have a lot of autonomy.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Especially again, if you have that team that's, can carry those torches and really champion those various, services. So let's talk a little bit about that. So you guys offer a lot of, services there that maybe you're not going to find at, definitely not your big box pharmacy, but even, a lot of independent pharmacies aren't going to offer the scope of services that you guys have. So first off, when you walk in, I think patients are going to be kind of greeted with that really nice front end. The product lineup that you have out front offers that boutique experience, which is one of the neat aspects. I always love those pharmacies. It's just kind of cool to go in and have the fun, like, drugstore boutique feel. And so I guess Leslie, kind of Mark's wife, Leslie Newberry, kind of heads that up. And then you guys have a large focus on vaccines, testing, screening. So you guys are doing not only point of care testing for COVID, but going past that. So tell me a little bit about your test and screenings.
Yeah, so that was like the best thing about it. And I think it's really important to kind of diversify in that area, especially like a lot of people are complaining, or they've complained about reimbursements for a long time. And even just patients. Like I remember talking with patients and, saying, hey, Will, it's so good to see you. Like, but then, they would say, well, it's good to see you too, but that means I'm sick if I see you. So it's kind of a bummer. But I love pharmacies where you can just go in and buy something and not be sick and then, leave. And so I love just the idea of that. And so really it started in 2016. When I came back, I started precepting students, and my very first student, Maliha, I tasked her with, hey, let's look into point of care testing. Like, in pharmacy school, we did, full lipid panels, A1Cs, blood glucose, all these different tests. Like, how can we start, strep and flu, how can we start working on those? And so in 2016, she figured out, all the things that everyone knows about now, like the CLIA wave license, the CMS, kind of certificate, what machines did we need? And so we really expanded on that. And we started doing strep and flu testing in 2017. And we've been doing point of care testing basically for 6 years. And so when COVID happened, we were already really well poised for that. And so what that looked like for us, and I think this is an important part of what's next in the future, is utilizing our touch points, because pharmacies are the only healthcare provider where you can go in pretty much any time without an appointment. And also we see our patients and talk to our patients like at least, 12, 13, 15, 20 plus times a year. Imagine if every time they came in, we just took a blood pressure, added it to the labs in Pioneer, and that gets sent as an e-care plan to their physician that we're working with to help lower their blood pressure, lower their cholesterol. Hey, you have a diabetes patient, you come in every 6 months, I do an A1C via point of care testing, upload it to your labs, that gets sent to your physician, and they can help control your diabetes by seeing these little data points in between your once a year thing. And so we started doing that. And we also started doing a lot of cholesterol testing for prior authorizations for our specialty pharmacy. So we started doing a point of care to show that, hey, in order for insurance to keep paying for at the time, your new PCSK9, like injectable cholesterol medications, you have to show an LDL of less than 100. So the patients would come into our pharmacy, we would go ahead and do the cholesterol screening, show that they're at goal, send that information off to the insurance, and then it would be approved. And so there was a lot of things that we were doing that were just probably like more forward thinking in the sense of how do we utilize that service in the greater kind of arc of healthcare. And so the next piece is being paid for it. We charge cash, which is great because still plenty of people were curious about their A1C. They were nervous about going to their doctor, so they wanted to get a little check to make sure they're on the right track. So we had a lot of that. And then strep and flu was huge too. And so even partnering with, I know a lot of people can do like, protocols or collaborative practice agreements, but same thing, it's Friday night, 7:30, doctor's not open, go and get a strep test. And then, boom, you've got an antibiotic. And so we really enjoyed that. And that was really cool. And it really set us up because we were already doing point of care testing when COVID hit. So, and we already had all the machines too, which was really nice.
Yeah. So I feel like the COVID pandemic really kind of opened the consumer's eyes to a product category that maybe we didn't realize existed, was, that the neighborhood pharmacy can actually provide those services. I can't tell you how many patients I've seen walk in flu season and say, hey, I think I might have the flu. And the pharmacist was like, you got to go get a flu test. And then you can come back with a Tamiflu for that right there that's behind me on the shelf that I could, so you can really close that gap. And I think that offers, a lot more visibility now. But it's really interesting that if you look at the healthcare spend nationally and what we're spending the big money on, the hypertension, cholesterol, and the diabetes, when we're looking at those big, priority disease states, and then you look at, hey, these are like the big spends. These are the things that I can actually move the needle on. It really makes sense to focus on actually, taking those screenings and looking at that blood pressure, that A1C, that cholesterol, like at the pharmacy level. It seems weird that, when you say it out loud, if that's the big spend, if that chronic care management is really where we need to focus, why aren't more pharmacies adapting to that early on?
Yeah. And I think part of it is just a lot of it is how are we going to do it? And so every time I talk to my friends or even my staff, I'm almost ready now because every time I propose something, I always prepare myself for, well, when are we going to do that? Or how do we have the time to do that? And so I always tell them that my job is to provide, just like Mark provided me with resources, like my job is to make your life easy so that we can take on these new things. And so if that means optimizing our filling process by med syncing everything, great. Because now we're still doing the same amount of work potentially, but making it a little bit smaller. And so now we have all of this room to kind of keep working on stuff. And so always thinking about how is this going to fit into your existing workflow? How can you handle this? And like, how are you going to provide the time so it doesn't just, like you said, peter off and fall out of style or, something you can do. So I think a lot of people just need it to have the way paved for them too. I think that was something that was very interesting, even in the early parts of testing, is that people, like I said, people want an outline. They want it to be perfect. They want to know every little thing so they don't stumble. And I think that's something that I think more people need to kind of wrap their head around of, hey, listen, we know we need to do this. We don't know what it looks like, but let's try to head that way together. So that's why it's so cool with Connect, getting to talk with people that are like-minded, learn from people, have, NCPA, your state organizations working together to figure this out. Because, if one person figures it out and they can share it with everyone else and we can keep advancing, it'd be good. But I do think, I don't know, what are your thoughts on it too, Will? Because it's like, what stops people from doing something new or something that we should do that, but we just haven't done it yet. But what have you found as like an installer? Like, why haven't people turned on the print queue? Why don't people do A1Cs and stuff,
Yeah. So one is doing anything differently is hard. And I think that there's like a mental block to doing anything differently just because of change for the sake of change, right? Like just change in itself. But I think the other barrier is, if I change this, my staff's not going to be happy, right? So staff buy-in. But then, the big part is showing that return on your investment. Like, I really want to do this, but is this going to make financial sense? And I think you're right when you mentioned MedSync. I think that's kind of a big process, a big process changer, because if you're not doing MedSync, if you're at a pharmacy that hasn't made that leap to change the way you're doing things, okay, and then Rannon comes in and says, hey, I think we should be getting blood pressure readings, right? So if you're not doing MedSync, if you have a patient with just 4 medications, okay, look at all the touch points for 4 medications that aren't synced. Each one of those medications is going to have a patient calling in asking for a refill. It's going to have your team going through workflow, possibly reaching out for refills, and then notifying the patient that the prescription is ready, and then the patient coming to pick that up. And so for a fairly simple patient, you're having 4 to 5 touch points for each prescription times 4. So which one of those 20 touch points throughout the month with that one patient, which one of those touch points is the one where you're going to be clinical, right? Where you're going to make an impact. And so I think that probably that appointment-based model is the key to making that actual, impactful interface with the patient.
And that's something that I really want to see in the future too. It's like we started, so vaccines was a big thing for me. So literally the day I came back to Tarrytown, I met with my mentor professor at UT, and I came up with like a plan for vaccines. And so right now, like we have on our website, you can book a yellow fever consultation or travel vaccine consultation at my pharmacy, and literally patients pay $30 just for my pharmacist to sit down and go over what they might need. And it's a $15 or 15-minute visit. And if they need a yellow fever vaccine, which we have the authorization from the CDC to do, then, we can go ahead and give it. But that's a good example of, hey, like we are getting, paid for what's in our head and our knowledge, not just what we dispense. And so trying to change that model of, hey, our pharmacist time is valuable and this is something that's going to help you, right? And so if you spend $30 and realize you don't need a yellow fever vaccine for where you're going, or you know what, you probably qualify, but based on your risk factors, it might be pretty dangerous for you to get one because there's all these contraindications and precautions. And so really having that as a resource is really helpful. So there's been times where people will sit down with them, all right, Will, you're going to Tanzania. Great. These are the warnings. These are the things you need. Which vaccines have you gotten? Great. You need this, this, this. However, because you're this age, this risk factor, I don't recommend it. And then great. Visit done. Thanks for your time. And we just got not even reimbursed, but we got paid for that because again, we might have saved someone, $100 consultation fee at a travel clinic, or where they're just going to push off the vaccine and try to get paid out of pocket no matter what. So I think that kind of idea of how do we get reimbursed for things outside of pharmacy is important. And so kind of creating that environment is good too. So like today, I think we have 3 yellow fever appointments with various patients and stuff too. And then on Monday, we have another 3. And so that's now, 45 minutes of work, but you're getting, I say reimbursed, but you're kind of starting to train folks that like pharmacists have values beyond just filling a prescription.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple questions to kind of build on that. How do you get your foot in the door for those conversations? How do you start that conversation or make the patient feel comfortable and trust you enough that you're the one they go to with that conversation? And then B, I think you touched on something really interesting, that it's not always going to be a third-party reimbursement where you're getting paid. There's a lot of opportunity for cash pay with your patients if you can build that value.
Yeah, I think so too. And part of it's nice too because being authorized to give the yellow fever vaccine, it puts you on a very select list. So when you look up yellow fever vaccine near me on the CDC finder, I mean, Austin's a huge city, but there aren't really that many folks that have it. And then it was kind of, this was a bummer, but I got the approval for yellow fever. I think we did like 30 shots in a matter of a month, and then it went on back order for 4 years. So just literally probably like, 3 months ago, or if not a little bit longer ago, it became available. So we started doing them again. And so it was just funny that like sometimes you have all the right intentions and something out of your control happens. And so, I was ready to blow up the travel vaccine thing probably in 2018 maybe. And then with, the pandemic, that didn't happen. And so I think people underestimate how valuable our services are, or how much patients are willing to pay, right? Because what I did was I just called all the travel vaccine clinic or travel vaccine providers in the area and just said, hey, like if I go to Uganda and I need a yellow fever shot, how much is that going to cost me? Out of pocket, non-negotiable, $130 consultation fee. If you do get the vaccine, they'll try to run your insurance, but otherwise it's $150 for the administration of the yellow fever vaccine. So you're talking about a $450, if not $600 visit just to get a shot versus, most insurances don't cover yellow fever. So I just charge a flat fee of, $330. And then that also includes the travel consultation as well if they end up getting the shot. And you're still making a good margin on it and providing a service. And again, if someone can afford to go on safari, in Tanzania, or not Tanzania, but, in Africa, I think they could, pay some money to save some time. And also those visits just take a lot quicker, like we can have people in and out a lot quicker than if they schedule an appointment and have to go through all this other stuff. So I think knowing our worth, but also just seeing what's out there, right? Like I could have put that on our website and people would have been like, I'm not doing that. But you kind of like people vote with their feet, so to speak. And right. So people will choose something that might be more convenient or something that is more beneficial to them, just if you give them the option.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so that's one of those things that if I'm going out of the country, I want to make sure that I get my insurance cards, where my family here can access it. You want to do all of these certain things. I want to set the timer on the plants, like,
yeah, exactly.
You're doing all of those, best practices, and I think that the pharmacy is definitely in a more accessible spot as far as healthcare for that than going to your normal provider. So, how do you kind of create that relationship with your patients where if they need something, I know that that's my first call. So how do you cultivate that first call priority?
Yeah, I think a part of it is just consistency, right? Like the whole thing with that Google review is they had a problem, they had a need, and we, in fulfilling that need, made them feel valued and made it a good experience. And so again, it's a testament to your team and how you take care of folks. And it's kind of like the weakest link, right? Like if you have one employee that you're like, oh, I just hope they never talk to someone because it's going to be, they're going to just rub them the wrong way. Like that's really tough. And so what's really nice about all of our team is that it doesn't really matter who they talk to. I know that they're going to be taken care of in like the Tarrytown way. And if not, how do we coach them? And so my pharmacists, like, Megan, Ellie, and Jess, and like Han and Lynn, they are great about just knowing how to take care of people and how to figure out problems and problem solve. And so I teach my students this too, but when someone comes to the counter and, hey, Will, I'm here to pick up my prescription, and you tell me, hey, sorry, I don't have anything for you ready. Like a lot of pharmacies will just stop at that, right? But then I always say, well, that's not helpful, right? Like, what if you went to the counter after you ordered food and they're like, hey, sorry, I don't see your order in here.
Right.
Right. But no, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. What were you looking for? Hey, who was supposed to call it in? All right. Well, if it's urgent care, maybe they called into the wrong place. Let me call for you. So I always teach them to kind of go above and beyond. And so part of building that rapport is, just like you may not have an opportunity to help that one disgruntled customer, you only kind of get one shot in a lot of things. And so if you have that patient, like there was a grocery chain that just shut down like a few blocks away from us, and we got a lot of influx of patients in. Just little things like coaching, like, my team to just say, hey, if someone comes in and they say and make a little comment like, man, I've never been in here, it's so nice, or wow, like I'm a new patient, I had to come over here because this other place closed down, just thank them, be like, oh, well, thanks for coming in, and we're glad you're here. Just stuff like that to make little deposits in the little PR bank and stuff. So I think the more that you can be kind and reliable, the more, when they think about calling someone, like I've called doctors where their secretary is just very rude, and it doesn't make me really feel good about calling that doctor again, right? But if I know that I call Pioneer, support, or if I call Will, or if I call Tarrytown, and someone is always going to be there to like advocate and fight for you, I think that kind of breaks the barrier down when you think of who should I call, and you always will go to the path of like least resistance. And so if the path of being treated kindly and having someone figure out your problem is what they think of when they think of your pharmacy, that's when things get really interesting. Because then when you come to them and say, hey guys, we are doing this new point of care, A1C, diabetes education, they know that, hey, if they do it at any level of how they took care of my COVID test or my compounded prescription, I feel pretty good about what they're trying to do here as well.
Yeah, I think one of the really important touch points and one of the areas that you've kind of focused on is that transition of care when a patient is going through one of those really challenging times and with a lot of changes. That's such an ideal time to really build that relationship and make sure that patient's on the right track. So tell me a little bit about how Tarrytown has kind of managed that process, and does that process kind of bleed over into patients that have come over from that pharmacy that closed? Do you guys kind of address those almost as a transition of care?
Yeah, so a lot of it's, again, MedSync. And so when I think about, it's almost like MedSync's pretty much the pharmacy answer for everything. And so when you think about someone that's transitioning from the hospital, I mean, I can think of multiple stories where you have, older patients that come in with a thick stack of papers of discharge paperwork that's like hospital guidelines mixed in with, counseling points and their meds and all this stuff. And they just don't really know what to do. They have Dr. Smith that's been taking care of their medication regimen for 30 years. And then some hotshot hospitalist comes in and says, I'm switching this all up and good luck, So a part of it is MedSync because basically it's a med rec, right? Every single month you're reconciling their medications. And what's really cool about that is being proactive. And so a lot of medicine is reactive, right? You go to the hospital when something already bad has happened. You don't go to a wellness visit. You go when you've broken your toe. You go when you're feeling really crummy, and then you realize that you have diabetes or you're having to pee a lot and stuff. And so what could you do that's proactive? And that's why I really like MedSync, is that like, why in the world would pharmacies wait around for a patient to call and give us business, right? What if we could be proactive and be like, hey, I know you have 10 prescriptions. like instead of being annoying like a chain saying, I'm just going to autofill it, it really is like, hey,
right.
You have a week of meds left. Has anything changed? How are you doing? What's different? Oh yeah, last week I got a new prescription. Don't worry, I short filled it and lined it up. And so that's a big part of it. And so when I think of transitions of care, we're still early on that now because the reimbursement for it hasn't really been lined up. And I've talked a lot about like cost sharing and stuff. I just don't really think cost sharing works or is really that like effective. And I know, Amina does a lot of things with, working with other providers. I just think at some point we're going to need to get reimbursed directly for what we're doing because, most of the hospitalizations or readmissions of the hospitalizations are because of medication errors. And so again, have the medication expert look at things, what's going on, where's the duplication, follow up with them, have them come in for a blood pressure, monitoring thing. So when we did our like grant funded research project with UT and Tarrytown to look at transitions of care, it really was something that we're really poised well to do. I had my pharmacy technician do the med rec, right? If they were one of our patients, great. He's updating their medication or their med sync. He's making notes. We're able to follow up with them. Now with the ability to build these care goal triggers, that's kind of what we're doing now. It's like, hey, this was a new medication added on. In 5 to 7 days, it'll flag and go to a queue where now my pharmacist during their clinical time will go through and like follow up with them. They'll document. And so that's all the stuff that I think is the future. But again, until we get reimbursement, there won't be really wide adoption of that. So now we're in this weird piece with working with CPESN to kind of show our value, but part of it is just having to do it. But I think the way that it works right now in indirect reimbursement would be MedSync. So have a patient come out of hospital. Hey, you know what? We have a med rec or transitions of care service. And what that is as soon as you get discharged, my technician Mike's going to call you, figure out your drug regimen, get it all lined up, send that list to your primary care physician, and we're going to call you in 7 days to follow up with how you're doing because the hospitalist started you on a new med. So I think that's probably the best way to indirectly get paid for our services of making sure that, these refills are happening, but also we're being more efficient with our time, like you mentioned as well. So I think that's kind of where we're at now of how people could almost justify the cost where it's like, it is saving us time, it's providing a service for your patients, and it really is providing better patient care. And then eventually, like you mentioned too, if we can keep showing that we're helping folks stay out of the hospital, even though we're not the ones billing for it, then we'll be able to be incentivized, hopefully, to prevent those high dollar readmissions. And so that's kind of the process now of like using your existing system or using transitions of care to get into MedSync, and I think that's a really, really great opportunity to have that talking point with your patient.
Yeah. And when you can perform those medication reconciliations for those new patients that are coming in, and you can track that, and then at some point have that conversation with your local hospitals and say, hey, look, here's this patient list, and actually look at those readmission rates. You can definitely show where you've had an impact. And that's one of the things you're actually going to be talking about at Connect is showing that medication reconciliation process within the software. So super excited about that. And I was thinking also when you were kind of describing how that just rolls into MedSync, it's also the difference in being an active participant in that transaction. So if I'm the one activating a transaction every month or on a recurring basis, then as a consumer, like it's my responsibility to shop where I do that every month. Like if I have a reoccurring expense that I'm initiating, I'm going to, look at am I going to the best place, right? If I'm just a consumer, I'm going to shop that differently than, if it's a service that's provided by a trusted healthcare professional that reaches out to me. It kind of changes the whole scope of that transaction to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think what's so interesting is that, and we even tried a lot of different things where like we even tried like a subscription service for MedSync. That's one of the things that, James worked on. And it really is something that, patients that had more than 4 medications really saw the benefit of that, right? Like you mentioned, all those touch points of like, they would be like, man, if I could pay $5, $10 a month for someone to manage this, that's totally worth it. But the person that's, a college student getting one medication a month, they don't really see the value of it. And what we really saw is that we almost build a captive audience with MedSync, so that, no one's going to do it like we do. Like no one can do it like the great Pioneer users that use MedSync. And so even if someone does transfer, if they're like, let's say, the pharmacy is too nice and smells too good and they want to go to a different pharmacy and they transfer their prescriptions, it takes a month to get out of sync. You know that, Will, right? So it's like, yep. I mean, it takes no time at all if you're not keeping up with sync for it to fall out of place. And we've had so many people that were on sync, maybe they moved a little bit further away and they just tried the pharmacy right by their house. And then they'll transfer back and drive 15, 20 minutes because they were I'd rather drive 15 minutes once a month and know everything is all ready to go than pop into the pharmacy every other day because, it's not ready, or, we have to order it, or, you wanted that one? I have to research the doctor. So it really is interesting because once we get people on MedSync, it's really difficult for those patients to kind of, it's almost like once you get a taste for, fiber, it's hard to go back to dial-up, and so it's really a nice thing to offer just for us because we're being proactive in getting refills. So if you can take a refill that someone would remember refilling it 9 times out of the year to now 12, you've increased your revenue potentially by, quite a bit versus if you're just, waiting around for someone to call in a script if they remember. It's just pretty difficult, and it just helps our patients out too. So we're trying to figure out like what's that next step. Even with our facilities, like we're syncing up all of our facilities now too. And it's so funny. Like we have EHR access for the long-term care facilities that we work with, and sometimes I think even for me, I thought it was very daunting to try to set it up because for one facility it took a really long time to try to get coordinated with them. And then my pharmacist, Megan, she's awesome. And I'm having her work on facility relations. In one afternoon, she got EHR access for another huge facility for us. And I was like, what? Like, here I was in my head thinking it'd be really difficult. And she just emailed like 3 people. And then all of a sudden she's like, hey, I got it. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. So I think a lot of it is, even for me, you can kind of get bogged down about like it, the daunting process of like doing something new or thinking, projecting that, they won't want to do that or they won't give us this. And so a lot of it's just trying to get out there and give it a shot.
Awesome. Yeah. Again, sounds like just having that amazing team is really one of the major keys there.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And like I said, all the things that we do, like I can't do without them. So they're amazing. But yeah. But Will, what are you excited for Connect about? Like, I know it's been a while since we've been back, so we're getting the band back together. So
yeah, let's get the band back together. Yeah, because it's been a while since we've been able to meet up in person, and this year we have a bigger schedule than ever. We've had a lot of changes with over the past 2 years, just in the business of pharmacy, and then also within PioneerRx. So it's going to be a bigger, better show than ever, and just really excited about the speaker lineup that we have. Have a great MedSync workshop, and then we're doing that early this year because it's everything else and the curriculum kind of builds on that MedSync and having that strong MedSync. So really excited about building on that with so many of our great pharmacists, more than we've ever had. Our speakers are our users. We have a handful of fundamental classes, that are PioneerRx staff. But again, so much of it is just the success stories from pharmacists like Rannon Ching who are coming in to say, hey, this is how we do the things that make us successful. These are the nuts and bolts behind the success stories. So always super, super, super exciting to be able to bring that and especially in an environment where you can interact with those people. So
yeah, I think that's like the most fun is like the interacting with people and the fact it's like we all speak the same language. It's like Pioneer is like the binding force and stuff. So I always think it's interesting how other people like use the platform. And yeah, you're right. When it's nice when you can ask the speaker like, hey, what are your location settings? Or like, hey, what do you do here? Where do you enter in this like care goal? And so that's always been really fun. So I'm pumped too. It'll be fun.
Yeah, it's so great to go and just see everybody in person. It's like the 1 week out of the year I get to be like really cool. I get to know everybody in the room and be helpful and so it's always just amazing.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be a lot of fun. Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be cool.
All right, we're closing in on the hour. I'm going to give you back the rest of your day. Thanks so much for joining us, man. I could keep you here and talk your ear off for another hour, but I'm going to let you get back to work at the pharmacy today, and hopefully I'll have you back on before too long.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. It's always a pleasure talking with you guys, and yeah, looking forward to seeing you and the others at Connect. So it'll be fun.
All right, bud. Talk to you later.
All right, see ya.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Scripts, presented by the Catalyst Pharmacy Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please support our channel by liking, subscribing, and clicking the notification bell so that you'll be notified anytime we post new content. To stay up to date with all of the latest independent pharmacy news and content, follow PioneerRx on your preferred social media platform.